Something I've seen a lot lately is this incredibly stringent and rigid approach to world building when it comes to tabletop games, and while I'm not saying that any of that is bad, I do think it can be extremely detrimental to limit your games in such a way.
Well, let me speak to the man in charge.
Sarcastically, I'm in charge. I don't.
Before I jump too deep into this topic, I do want to give credit where it's due to the basic expert. His recent posts and videos related to the Mythic Underworld has definitely influenced my thoughts on this stuff lately, and while personally I've always strived to include these aspects to my games, really based on his replies and the people that disagree with him, I've come to realize just how violently opposed some people are to this stuff. So hopefully I can help with changing the conversation a little bit. As the evolution of tabletop games has progressed, there's been this notable trend where hobbyists and creators alike have increasingly focused on realism or naturalism when designing dungeons, settings, and encounters for their game. This approach isn't bad, it provides a layer of believability and coherence, but I find that it often comes at a great cost when overly used. You lose the evocative, the mysterious and surreal qualities that define things such as the Mythic Underworld or just strange otherworldly settings in the first place. I mean, again, there are advantages. I even spoke to this in my realism and verisimilitude video. It makes sense, it makes the world feel lived in and believable, and it can really help get the players immersed when they have the ability to predict things and understand environments quickly because it's all based on real world logic. All of this stuff is good, and it's easy to quickly pick up. However, it doesn't seem like creators ever marry these concepts. Everybody leans into the extreme one way or the other. You can never have both for some reason. You can never have crafted dungeons, natural caves, and mythical underworlds. They're bogged down in just realism, or on the flip side, people lean fully into the strange, which can pose its own unique problems. This isn't how it has to be though. These things can coexist in harmony, and your game or setting will be better for it. There are drawbacks to realism, regardless of what people say, and it does have a notable impact on gameplay. Consider that everything in a game is built upon strict realism. If you have elite level players who understand the rules of the game and know how to approach these things, the game becomes completely procedural at a certain point. Even a dungeon, which is supposed to be some of the most dangerous locations in a setting, just start to become kind of like a 5-step process. This isn't bad, obviously it's good and you want players that know the game well, but instead of the dungeons being a location of mystery or intrigue, you're left with something that almost feels better to run away from the table. When players can start to anticipate the layouts, enemy behaviors, or even the hazards of the dungeon, then from that point forward, the dungeon starts to lose any real tension or excitement that comes with exploring the unknown. I've even seen this cause players to kind of disengage with the game entirely. Initially, it's awesome. In the discovery process, players fucking love these moments where through experimentation, they finally figure it all out. But eventually, over time, it does grow stale, and it does start to lose the evocative and compelling aspect to it. Let's consider the opposite though. In contrast, a setting that embraces the strange, or as the basic expert would say, something like the Mythic Underworld, keeps players on their toes as they can never be sure what they'll encounter next. The laws that govern this place are completely unknown to them and requires time and effort to learn. The setups that they used to use to maximize safety and efficiency go out the window, and the players are forced to think on their toes again. One of the big criticisms that I saw was that including things like this was just a bit too imaginative for them. Like they were insinuating it was just a bit too fantastical for fantasy games. I really don't know when this shift came within the hobby of embracing the mundane and rejecting the mythical and evocative, but it really is kind of an eye-opening situation for me. Before, there was just this assumption on my part that, of course, people included strange things in their fantasy games, but the more I look, the more I realize that a lot of that has actually been rejected and heavily dismissed as gonzo. Now, if you're unfamiliar with that term, the way I can summarize it to the best of my knowledge is that it tends to refer to a more wild or over-the-top chaotic style of play that feels random with a mix of surreal or absurd elements. You can imagine mixing dinosaurs, time travel, spacecrafts, and magic. And the idea of the Mythic Underworld often gets this disparaging label put on it simply because the laws that govern that area are different than the laws that govern the overworld. People are seriously opposed to the idea that they might just run into some wild shit deep underground, and if the ecology or even the laws of physics don't make sense to them, it's just hand-waved away as random and stupid. Let's look at some Greek mythology, since it's typically the most popular and well-known. Everybody has heard of the river Styx and that it represents the boundary between the living and the dead. Souls are ferried across by the boatmen to reach Hades. This alone is already quite evocative, but a lot of people who are only exposed to this stuff through modern media don't actually know that there are more rivers within Hades. You have the river Lethe, known as the River of Forgetfulness. Souls within Hades had to drink from the river in order to forget, so that they may be reincarnated, unburdened by the memories of their previous life. One description is that the waters may never quench your thirst, so those who partake end up drinking more and more until finally all of their memories are lost. On the other hand, you also have the Pool of Memory, or the Mnemosyne Spring. Cults from the overworld would instruct their initiates to seek out this pool of memory after death, so that they may drink from the waters and achieve enlightenment, escaping the cycle of reincarnation. This is profound, but it can't be justified with any ecological or natural explanation. Sure, you can justify rivers existing underground, but beyond that, not everything needs a definitive answer for its creation. The more mysterious, the more interesting these things are. It's really kind of a shame. I understand the emphasis on more realism and the benefits that it provides, but I don't think the trade-off is so great that it is worth losing the evocative. We're still playing a fantasy game after all, where the vast majority of reference material is built off of mythical concepts. So it seems very strange to me that you would have these people that reject one half of it but embrace the other with no questions. And again, you really don't have to make that trade-off. Some dungeons can be naturalistic. You can have natural caves and ruins and all kinds of shit underground, but then you can also have the underworld. And maybe, but not always, these things can overlap with each other. You can have a natural cave within the mountains. Let's say you have a group of greedy dwarves, and in their greed they dig too deep and stumble upon an ancient evil in the nameless place beneath the earth. The upper levels are naturalistic. You have all these mines and caves dug out by greedy dwarves, but then you have this place where things are very different, that is home to creatures that are alien even to the creator of evil.
What is this new devilry?
Beyond any. Run!
All of that sounds pretty mythic to me. Regardless, the strange or the mythical underworld absolutely has a place in every fantasy setting, should you want it to be there, and so far I haven't really seen a good, compelling argument as to why not. Unless you're dead set on your game being a full-on medieval simulation, so long as you are using elements of mythology and fantasy, you can always find a place for these sorts of things. Yes, they'll be weird, and sometimes they'll clash with the other expectations of your game, but if done well, your players will always love running into these things that force them to confront the unknown. The trend and focus on realism and naturalism is well-intentioned, but in my opinion, misguided and overly focused on as of late in order to justify the verisimilitude. Unfortunately, I find that creators that take too hard of a stance into this style of creation are often burnt out by the constant need to justify the existence of everything. So much so that I think a lot of them don't even make it to the gaming table. They spend years and years of hard work crafting a setting that only ever exists in their own mind. You shouldn't strive to have some sort of ecological or biological answer for everything. Embrace that you're playing a fantasy game and use your imagination or draw inspiration from these great wells of reference material. So let me know in the comments what you think. Is this stuff just too immersive breaking, or are we missing out on a key aspect of fantasy? Thank you for watching. I'm Trill, and I hope you enjoyed.